The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by two guests. This is for our MHI Industry Group series, and today we'll be talking to Dean Elkins, who is the Senior Director of Robotics and Vision at Gray Solutions. And we'll also have Chris Lingenfelter, who is co-founder and managing partner at Robot Advisors. And they're going to be talking to us about the TRG Industry Group, which we're going to find out what that stands for and what they're all about here. So Dean and Chris, welcome to the show. How are you both today?
Doing great, Kevin. It's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Fantastic. Appreciate having me back, Kevin. It's good to see you again.
You too as well, and great to get you both here and talk about this topic. I've been loving talking to the different industry groups from MHI and kind of hearing about how they create value within the industry. So why don't, Dean, you kind of kick it off for us here and tell us what is the TRG Industry Group and what is it that your group is all about?
You bet. Thanks, Kevin. So, as one of the many industry groups that is organized under the banner of MHI, our team of technology leaders has been put together to inspire user confidence and foster the adoption of robotic solutions to drive efficiency, really in supply chain applications more than anything else. So how do we do that? We, as a collective, are put together to let our member companies know a bit about market intelligence and market awareness and clarity. We try to do that by the enrollment of industry leaders and experts in our field to let people know how they can access market access tools. We do things like safety advocacy, and we do things like deliver promotional marketing materials, and we provide education that might be founded on a buyer's journey. We let people know what works and what doesn't work. And again, we really advocate the use of robotics and AMR technology to really help ease the buyers in their journey to, frankly, make them more efficient and profitable.
Very nice. Yeah, and I think and it's the robotics group is TRG, right? So, there's a lot going on in the robotics industry and a lot of different parties, too, that are involved in that. So, Chris, why don't you kind of tell us about some of those industry professionals that are involved in the group and what does that encompass overall?
Sure. So, of course, we have OEMs or manufacturers of warehouse and supply chain robotics, whether those be, picking arms for each picking or case picking, autonomous mobile robots moving around the warehouse, or combinations thereof of multiple robotic technologies. So you have the manufacturers, but we also have consultants, integrators, component suppliers. There are quite a few component suppliers who help with the group, as well as we have some media partners that are members.
All right. And Chris, we know you're media / advisor and all that stuff with the great trade show recaps and everything that we see. Quick turnaround. Very impressive. I know how much that takes to do that.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Our core, we're known for our video work, right? And our media work, but Robot Advisors actually helps either folks find the right robots for their warehouse or helps robot companies find the right warehouses for their robots. So sometimes we joke that we're a robot dating service, but I think of ourselves as a consultancy with a media bend.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great what you guys are doing, definitely. And, having that involvement, kind of a wide spectrum there of different individuals involved in the group to kind of come together and talk about what's happening in the robotics industry and then, ultimately help that end user. Tell us a little bit about how does having kind of those multiple different parties, ranging from, like you said, component manufacturers to the OEMs to consultants to the media as well, how does that kind of help create better synergies and ultimately deliver more value to the end users that are adopting these robots in their operations?
Kevin, I think a lot of that is based on time earned experience. Experience is a great asset.
Mm.
And when we look at the networking that happens within TRG, or we look at the leadership that helps guide TRG, it's experience that becomes one of our greatest assets.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, it's very important for us to espouse what to do and what not to do. And a lot of that comes through trial and error, through providing solutions and knowing what works and what doesn't work. So when we have, again, a collective group of people that may come from a robot background, specifically in material handling, or we may have autonomous mobile robot people within the group that can help guide our end user members to successful solutions, that's really what it's all about. Again, we know, particularly, for example, from a safety perspective, as we provide safe solutions to our end users. Actually, we don't provide the solutions, or as we advise our solutions on what a safe solution might be, it's important that we have people involved even at sensor level to let them know what's going to work and not work, and again, allow them to gain safety and efficiency in the solutions. So that's why we have such I think, a broad membership role, if you will, because there's a lot of aspects in a robotic solution that people may not think about. It's the robot, it's the gripper, it may be vision, it may be, the AMR itself, it may be the layout of fencing, but we actually, again, as a collective, are able to guide people to what we believe a successful solution would be to enhance their ROI and keep their people safe.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting, Dean, and I mean I think that that wide array of perspectives as you talked about, and giving that example of safety as one, right? When all these things come together, and as you mentioned, there's multiple different components that some of these robotics companies are utilizing and bringing them together for their solution. And, maybe it's a similar robotic arm that somebody else is using, but then their gripper is different, right? Or the vision system or the sensors that they're using is different. And how do you kind of leverage that and make sure that, you're learning from each other on what's available out there, right? And how you can put those together in a unique way to, provide something to the end user that's efficient, safe, and effective, right, at the end of the day, which is, I think, the end user's goal, right, most of the time. So, if we look at
Kevin, I would
sure.
add to that, the space of what's possible is just a really dynamic and changing landscape, right? It's just you have a whole year between ProMat and the next Modex or whatnot, and in that time span, a lot of things are changing. So just helping folks stay on top of the state of the art and what's happening out there, and what the different member companies are how they're providing value. The other thing that's really interesting is the technology is always coming down in cost, which makes its application broader as you look at more and more use cases from an ROI standpoint. So the market adoption is something that we also help from an education standpoint.
And, it's hard for people sometimes to understand the relationship of all of these components. So maybe as a bit of a shameless plug, I always encourage people to get out there and attend shows like Modex or ProMat, because the vendors, the people that are displaying all of these solutions, typically will have a very comprehensive display of how all of these technologies come together in their booths. So, don't just use these trade show experiences as a place to go. Use them or leverage them as a place to learn, because you could absolutely learn about grippers and robots and AMRs and safety components and how people do risk assessments, et cetera, by attending shows like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point there, because there is so much, I think, at this Modex this past year, I mean, there's a couple people I heard say like, oh, this is turning into a robotics show, right? This is like just a material handling show, which we see so much of that, expanding. And as you mentioned there, Chris, from Modex to ProMat, there's so many advancements that are happening in just a year's time, basically. So I guess this is a good point here. I mean, we come to these shows to see what the latest is, right? And Dean, as you mentioned, you need to leverage them as a point to learn and educate yourself. But I guess tell us a little bit about, because the robotics group is, focused on creating awareness around these solutions and educational materials to help guide people in the right directions and get that understanding. So I guess tell us a little bit about some of those materials you put together, how you go about that, and maybe even how do you kind of leverage what TRG is doing to help prepare yourself better going into Modex or ProMat and be kind of, I guess, a little more well-versed kind of walking into that trade show floor.
A very good question, Kevin. And I think to the point earlier, buyers really do want to come in educated. And we've created what we call a buyer's journey, resource kit that's available at the TRG website, which is part of MHI. Just go to the industry groups and click on TRG. But we have case studies, videos, materials to really, if you're at the very beginning of your buyer's journey and you don't have any automation and you're not sure where to start, or if you're a little bit further down the path and you just want to stay up to date on the latest what's possible, those resources are available for folks on the TRG website. I would say that the more you can prime the pump before you get to these events, the better, the more effective you can be for your organization as you start to investigate. There are typically over 1,000 exhibitors at Modex and ProMat. And if you're there for all 4 days and you spend a minute at every booth and a minute traveling to the next booth, you can't reach them all, right? So you have to be discerning before you get there. You're just going to be overwhelmed.
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, Modex this year, was huge, right? Adding that additional hall in there. And, I talked to many people who were like, oh, I just plan to come for a day. And this is my first time coming. And they're like, I know that I need to come for more than a day now in the future. And I love that you actually did that calculation, Chris.
Well, we try to visit every booth and it's not possible. So we have ourselves, we have to be. ProMat's coming up here in March, and it's expanded into the Lakeshore Hall, the Lakeside Hall rather, as well as the North and South Halls. So it's also a record amount of exhibition space coming up here in Chicago. So
absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's a testament, I think, to how much our industry has grown and the importance of it, and just like the very cool technology that's coming into play. And being in our space is really exciting to be able to see some of that firsthand, I think.
And it's not just the time on the floor. There's a lot of great educational sessions that are part of the content that you can catch at these events as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dean, do you want to add any kind of tips from your angle too of preparation going into these shows?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm an old coffee table book guy, I should say.
Okay.
I always like to get my directory early. I'll typically have a task in mind and do my research and kind of figure out who's who in the zoo before I attend the show. The cool part is that it's very easy to discern who the robot manufacturers are, who the gripper manufacturers are, who the AMR manufacturers are. And whether you do it in digital form or printed form, plan out your journey. Make sure that, again, you stop by a bunch of the panel discussions that are offered by the association themselves, because they're just chock full of information on what works and what doesn't work from a buyer's perspective, and sometimes from the OEM's perspective as well, or the system integrator's perspective as well. So again, doing a pre-read and doing a little upfront mapping will, I think, make your experience at the show a little bit more efficient. But there's always going to be that surprise. There's always going to be some technology that you didn't even know existed, or that manufacturer that's super special that you're going to come across that you're just going to be wowed by. So do a little bit of pre-reading, but once you're there, keep an open mind and move around.
Shaunak McNeil, one of our robot advisors, wrote a piece last year, which is available on our website, that's titled "Don't Be a Kid in a Candy Store." So, go in with an objective. If you're interested in inventory drones, as an extreme example, figure out where those booths are, what sessions are going to do inventory automation for you, and go in with a plan, as opposed to just walking around and just being blown away by everything.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would add is an end user that may want to embrace automation, don't be shy about asking questions. People that are working the booths at trade events really are anxious to help you. You will learn something new just by asking questions. It doesn't mean that you're going to always get the hard sell, but you may get that really valuable nugget of information that may lead you to a technology. Somebody may say, did you know that so-and-so company or such and such company does have this technology? And they may guide you to a solution that you may not even be prepared to think about, but may solve a problem for you.
Yeah.
I would encourage folks to talk to other people who've been down the journey. You're not the first to walk down this path. And I think there are 10 case studies, end user case studies, on the TRG website that folks can check out, or listen to podcasts like yours, Kevin, and hear about customer experiences with the new technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are great tips all around there. And I'm curious too. I mean, you guys, as the TRG group, I mean, you guys are focused on, staying, I guess, kind of abreast of all this technology and what's going on, and, creating these materials and, giving overall awareness of what's happening in the industry for that end user. And, we talked about kind of the rapid advancements there from year to year, right? In such a really short kind of time frame. In a sense, we see a lot of very fast development. So I'm curious, how do you as a group kind of stay on top of that and stay ahead of it a little bit, in a sense, to be able to continue to deliver kind of that awareness to your end users?
It's not easy, right? I mean, I'll just be honest.
Yeah.
We have a team here at Robot Advisors, and we invest a lot. We go to 10 events a year. We devour all the media assets, the videos, the case studies, the trade publications, so that when people ask us about new technology, we're knowledgeable. But unless you're a Fortune 15 company that can afford to have a team doing this, it's not easy. I mean, there's a lot of legwork that goes into it. And honestly, it's if you think of it as a treadmill, every quarter someone's tapping it and making it go faster. So
I would say too, most of us, I would say virtually all of us, have this little bit of robot geek that lives inside of us. We have this passion and this thirst to always learn more. So I think all of our organizations just have people that I'm not going to say they live on YouTube, but they're frequent visitors to sites like that to learn more about what's out there. People today, when our buyers today, I'm happy to say, are, I think, far more in tune with what is available in the marketplace than ever before. And it's because of sites that post videos. And you're able to do so much more research online these days that people know surprisingly more than you might give them credit for. Certainly our employee base does as well. It's not uncommon at all for me to walk into the office and say, hey, one of our younger engineers will say, hey, I've got to show you this. Look at how AI interacts with this robot to make the picking process, so much easier and so much more efficient. So there's tools out there, there's media tools out there that really help simplify the educational part of this journey, because sites like YouTube, again, are a 24/7, 365 trade show. You can learn so much just by visiting and typing in the subject matter that you're interested in, and you're delivered in your own home, some of those very good educational solutions. So just wanted to throw that in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the industry has become so visual, I guess, in a sense, right? With all this like cool technology and hardware and stuff. And I love that there's that accessibility to be able to see these things in action now, whether it's through YouTube, as you mentioned, or like a LinkedIn video or something like that. And I think, not only does it allow those end users to see what's actually out there and what's possible in some scenarios too, but also for like the younger generation too. I think it's kind of a way to help get them interested in the industry that, because I think, they're younger and they think, oh, warehouse, okay, like 4 concrete walls, a bunch of boxes inside. I don't know if I want to do that, right? But, then you look at some of these technologies and they're like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's exciting. I had a student and she had an internship with, I think it was Costco or BJ's, I forget which one. And she got to work on a project when they're implementing some Fox robotics and doing like a test with them. And she got like super excited about that. Cool. I think, that's like very cool things that helps this younger generation kind of get adopted and bring them into the material handling industry itself. So, you mentioned kind of it's not easy, right? Keeping up with all these technologies and things coming out. So that's one challenge, I think, for sure, for end users, is kind of navigating this sea of options in a sense, right? But I'm curious, what are some of the other challenges that you both or as a group are seeing end users face when it comes to navigating this robotics landscape and trying to determine what's the right solution for them?
I think it's really important for an organization to define what moves the needle for them. And that's going to differ. The three of us, we may all be, retailers, right? And I might be really exploding on my online presence, and Dean might be opening 10 new stores next year, increasing his store count, right? And Kevin, you might be doubling your item selection that is available to your customers, right? So we each would have, in those cases, very different needs. And so you want to align your technology investment with the business goals so that you're supporting where the business needs to go. And I can't stress that enough, right? It's we all, as Dean said, we're in this because we love to geek out about the technology, and it's really exciting. But I feel for the guy who goes up to the CFO to get a project approved, and the answer is, well, it's cool. Yeah, it's not going to pay for itself, but I just really want this thing, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to fly, especially as our economy is dynamic as it is, and everyone's trying to eke out a benefit here or there. So I think that's the number one thing that we talk a lot about at TRG, and you hear it from folks who in the case studies as well.
I also think it's really important that, again, we really advocate strongly for the cultural education of automation within a company. I think the companies that are most successful are companies, as Kevin or Chris used the term invest. Part of that investment has to be operational education, or the establishment of automation champions within an organization, in a warehouse. I think when we talk about younger people, especially, these are people that grew up in the digital age. Younger people are not afraid of the paradigm shift that technology offers or causes. I think if you offer those people even more education on how something works and why something works, that's going to make those people that are making the financial decisions look a whole lot better from an investment standpoint. All too often early on in the golden days of automation, way back when, people would say, I want a robot just because I want a robot. And it would sit and it would fail because people didn't really understand how it worked because they were never sent to training, or they didn't create a culture within an organization that stated how a positive effect can occur through automation. They were just afraid of automation. These days, most OEMs, whether it be a robot or an AMR or a vision package, they offer fantastic user training. And whoever provides the system also needs to provide system operation training to the end users as well. Those are two really important ingredients for success, both OEM training and system operation training, because the more you know, the more you understand the process, and the more you understand how the automation is integrated into that process, the higher the odds are that you're going to be successful.
Yeah, great points there. And I think that's an interesting point too, about, I guess, the golden days, as you said, of automation, right? Where it's just like, oh, let's just get a robot because we want to have a robot, right? And then, not really having that understanding there. So I'm curious in that regard, are you guys seeing where, because we see a lot of around robots and automation and a lot of like proof of concept, right? And things of that nature. I mean, do you see where people are going, instead of like just, I guess, dipping their toes a little bit in robotics and automation? I mean, do you see where there's more like a larger investment into some of these robotics and automation solutions now because they're, it's been a few years where they've been very prevalent and now they're kind of more proven out there? There's a little more trust in some of these solutions?
100%. And in fact, that's borne out. We at TRG co-sponsor Modern Material Handling with Peerless Media's annual survey of robotic adoption in the supply chain. And I'm doing this from memory, so don't quote me, but it was something like 30% 2 years ago who were considering robotic technology in their operation. And that's jumped to more than 60% in the last survey. So yeah, the other thing I would caution folks is, don't think of this as a project, right? I want to get some robots to help my pickers or whatever. And when I put it in, I'm done. I think the way to think about it is like your goal perhaps is to improve operational efficiency so that your cost per item handled in the warehouse drops by, 20% over the next period of time, right? And it's a process, and you're always striving to get better, right? It's not, I ran the marathon, now I'm done. It's I want to be a fit person through my whole life, and to do that, I need to be investing in these technologies. And there'll be projects, there's steps along the way, of course, right? There's projects, but it's a mindset and an organizational culture, really, of automation
shift. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Dean, you were going to say something?
No, I was, simply, to reinforce the point, there is a lot of successful history to point to now. I think that where people that were making financial decisions 5 years ago, they may have been a little bit concerned about the robustness of the solution or, the life expectancy of a solution. I think people now have more than anecdotal evidence that shows that automation, when implemented correctly, can be very easy to use and last a long time and have a very long-term effect on positive ROI. 5 years ago, the vision to robot algorithms, the communications between the two in each's picking were not nearly as sophisticated and easy to use as they are today from a interface and AI perspective. And there's, again, lots of evidence out there now that points to many slickly developed ease of use tools that make the application of some of this technology much easier than ever before, which is why, again, I go back to my earlier point of trade show attendance. If you can't get into a factory or a warehouse where that stuff is being employed, you could easily see it again online or at a trade show. And I think those are great confidence boosters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great point there that, we've had that more history of projects and things of that nature to kind of prove that out and make people feel a little more comfortable, right? Oh, somebody else did this. Well, I guess I could do this too, right? And
Right.
it is that kind of mind shift, like you mentioned, Chris. It's a whole kind of cultural change in a sense. And, I've talked to a few people about that who've implemented some stuff and, how do they go about the change management aspect of that. And it's such a huge part of that as you kind of go down that journey and, take on that first project and then projects after that overall. So very interesting points there from you both and insights as well as kind of what's going on in the market and where people's heads are at, and also just how to navigate all this innovation that we're surrounded by here. So I'm curious from you both as we close out this conversation. I want to hear, what are you most excited for in 2025 when it comes to robotics in the warehouse?
I get personally excited, Kevin, about the interoperability of multiple robot types. I actually did a session at Modex in Atlanta last March on this topic with a handful of end user customers who have tried multiple robots, and whether it's an AMR bringing something to a station where it's picked or whatnot. It just it's really interesting. I think you can look at a robot in one sort of facet of your operation, and sure, it can make it better, but that's not what the business exists to do. The business exists to get orders out the door as efficiently as possible and as accurately as possible, right? And so that's a multi-step process, and coordinating all that is personally what gets me really excited. And I see more and more of it coming down the road, and that's one of the things that you see happening in real time when you come to a TRG member meeting where the companies are talking about collaboration and solving customer problems together.
I'm really kind of geeked out about sort of the MES software pieces that tie all these technology variants together. The reality is that we all know there's a labor shortage in the United States today. We all know that a great way to bridge the labor gap is through the employ of automation. Sometimes I'll call it steel collar workers. And the reality is that our buying habits as a society have changed. If Amazon doesn't show up at my door every day, I think something's happened to my wife. So there's always great concern there. But that means that orders need to be fulfilled differently, right? There's now very well developed technology for doing order picking through flexible automation. There's really great technology in doing goods to robot and goods to shipping based on various technology levels that are much more refined now. So I'm looking forward in 25 to the conglomeration of the hardware and software patches that are available today, just to gain and watch the efficiencies being gained in how warehousing is accomplished and orders are fulfilled.
Interesting there. And I love that kind of Amazon wellness check on your
It's important. I mean, it's a great barometer. Something's happening at the Elkins house. There hasn't been a package for 2 days.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So, Kevin, I'd like to close with the idea that if you're a manufacturer or OEM of robotic technology and you're not a member of TRG, we have an open tent, and we'd love for you to join if you're part of this community on the supply side. And if you're a user of this technology, please look at the resources that we have. We actually sponsor sessions at not just ProMat and Modex, but other industry events as well. We have a little bit of in a sense, we operate a speakers bureau, getting end users out there in front of buyers. So check us out, join us. We're also on LinkedIn, but most of the resources can be found on the TRG website.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com and in the show notes here so people can easily access it and leverage all the great resources that you guys are putting out there, and hopefully learn some stuff and get a little more aware on what's going on in the robotics world for material handling. So Dean and Chris, thank you very much for joining me on the show today, and it was a pleasure to learn more about the robotics group.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.